And what it made me realize is that every time I'm in a miserable situation, I will come out of it again. It's not like this cloud is going to stick over my head and follow me through. A storm has never stayed overhead.
Welcome to Live Rich, Have Fun, Save the World, a podcast focused on reimagining how we define success. Co-hosted by myself, Monty Bernard, and CEO of Expensify, David Barrett. Today on the show we have Polly Letofsky, the first woman to walk all the way around the world, doing so to raise awareness of breast cancer. Since her trip in 2001, she's written a best-selling book, 3 Miles Per Hour, The Adventure of One Woman's Walk Around the World, and is now a motivational speaker.
I guess, right?
I like that. I'm Monty. This is David, CEO of Expensify. I'm a microphone jockey, DJ, and jack of all trades thing at Expensify. So we started this podcast, Polly, about living rich, about having fun, and about saving the world, and how those 3 concepts really are how we start to define our measurement of success. I mean, it used to be how much money you got in the bank, how cool is your car, you got the new fancy gadget. Now, as we advance, not only as a company, but as people, as a society, we really find that measuring on those 3 metrics really is how we feel like that's how you're going to get the most out of life. And no one encapsulates that. No one lives that journey like you lived at that journey by walking around the entirety of the globe. Obviously, I want to talk about that. Obviously, I want to dive into your book, your mission. But I really want to know, what was it like day one when you got home? You were able to sleep in your own bed or just not be mobile for one day. What went through your mind that first day?
Well, it's not like you've been in the middle of camping out with the wild hogs in India, and then you get plunked back in Denver, Colorado. It sort of gradually changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it graduated from I'm in the third world, and then I move into the first world, and then I move into the US, and then I'm dying to get home.
Okay. Yeah. It was just a series of locks you're going through. It's a little less foreign.
Really,
yeah, a little more normal. You start to recognize the fast food chains. You start to recognize the street signs. You start to recognize things are a little more home. Things are a little more domestic. Okay.
Yeah. So I started getting closer. I mean, it was like a year and a half from the finish line, and I was like, yeah, I'm done. I'm exhausted.
So how long was this trip? And so, like, when did it start and when did it end?
We just dive in, don't we?
Let's do it.
What you guys do? Okay. It was 5 years long. It was one day shy of 5 years. So the place that I started was the place I wanted to finish. So I wanted to finish on the 5-year anniversary because it was so close. But then there was a big event going on there. So I was like, oh well.
So where was the start and end point?
I started and finished in Vail, Colorado. I had been living there, and when I left, so I say facetiously, it took me 5 years to walk from Vail to East Vail. I just took the scenic route. So yeah, it took 5 years, and I went across 4 continents, 22 countries, and 14,124 miles in 29 pairs of shoes. Does that wrap it up?
That's what sums it up. So you just sort of like just woke up one day and then just sort of I'm going to go west and just sort of heading towards the sunset?
Yeah, I wish it was that easy. It started when I was 12 years old. I was 12 and growing up in Minneapolis, really idyllic childhood, lots of friends around in that era in which, you don't come home until, the street lights are on, kind of thing. Mom doesn't know where you were all day. Didn't matter. She'd prefer it that way. It was one of those childhoods, right? So I really started to discover that there was this whole different world going on at about the age of 12, when I started reading the paper and I started seeing that kids are not living the same 12-year-old's life that I am, and me and my buddies, and playing kickball and stickball and spud and climbing trees. And I discovered that through the newspaper. So I started reading the newspaper every morning, feeling like quite the grown-up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd read about these places. It was 1974, so there was a lot going on in 1974 from, it's when Richard Nixon resigned, and not that I thought that was a big deal. What did I know? But Vietnam was ending, and I was like, why are people living like this? I don't understand, all the different cultures. It's just kind of an awakening as to how the world ticks and why is it all different, asking my 12-year-old self these questions. And while reading the paper one day, I see the story of a man walking around the world. So he is pushing this buggy. No, he's pulling the buggy, actually. I pushed a buggy. He was pulling a buggy and down this empty road, and there was a caption in the paper, and it said, David Kunst walking down Highway 6 in Colorado on his way home to Minnesota to become the first man to walk around the world. And I was like, what? I didn't. I swear to God, I had this moment. I didn't know you could think of such a thing if you were from Minnesota. I swear to God, I had that question. Like you had to be born somewhere else to have X dream,
Somewhere more exotic, yes.
Right. So he's from small town Minnesota. And I'm like, well, he could do it. I could do it. Right. I swear to God, this happened. I'm thinking, I can put one foot in front of the other just for years. I could do that. So swear, what I did was I walked around the house for like 3 hours. I don't know that anybody saw me or anybody asked questions, but I went and walked around the house for 3 hours going, well, yeah, I could do that.
This ain't so bad. This ain't so bad.
Right. All warmed up.
All good to go. Fast forward, was it 20 years later? Fast forward, you're actually hitting the rubber to the road, hitting the pavement.
Yeah, so that's when I was 12, and I didn't actually tell anybody. My mom says, no, you never mentioned it, and it was always in my head, so I suspect that it was one of those things you don't talk about until, or if you say it out loud, it's got to happen, so I better be clear about it. And it's really, at the end of the day, so impossible. I'm not going to really say it out loud. It's a fantasy. Okay, so 20 plus years go by. I'm now living in Vail, Colorado. And it was this culmination, this intersection of things that happened. One, I was pulling well into my 30s. And secondly, there was a number of women in my world that were being diagnosed with breast cancer all about the same time. And I thought, what is this breast cancer nonsense I'm hearing all about suddenly? So I went to the doctor and I said, listen, I want one of those, mammogram things. I got to get one of those, don't I? So and he says something that changed my life. He says, you don't need to worry about getting breast cancer because it doesn't run on your mother's side of the family. I was like, oh, well, good enough. Don't have to worry about it. And I went home or back to work from the doctor that day, and my friends really let me have it. He said, what? Of course you can get breast cancer. Every woman in the world is at risk for getting breast cancer. And off they go into, reeling me. Now, so those two events were happening when I was pulling into my 30s, and one, this breast cancer stuff at the same time. Remember, I'd always wanted to do this, but never was really serious about it because I thought it was so impossible. Yeah. And I'm at the library one day and I see this magazine, front cover of a magazine saying, first woman to walk around the world. And it was this, Fiona Campbell of England. And, this greatest walker of all time. And I'm like, oh my God. Someone actually did that. It can be done. Wow. And that kind of triggered that childhood dream again, and it started sneaking up to the forefront. And then I saw this article in the paper, like page 37D in the paper. I mean, it's like in the depths. And it said Fiona Campbell, in fact, has admitted to accepting rides for a large portion of the way. So, in fact, her title had been stripped or whatever. I don't know if it's a title, but, and I thought, now's my time. Yeah. And so all those three events came together, and I thought, I remember exactly where I was. When you have these light bulb moments? Yeah. And I was walking home 10 o'clock at night from work. I had a 2-mile walk home every night. And I was thinking about all these things, right? Especially these women going through breast cancer and blah, blah, blah. I thought, that's what I'll do that walk for that I've always wanted to do. And suddenly my head just started swirling, and I'm in the dark, walking down this recreation trail in Vail. And I started talking to myself, like out loud, right? Which is a really good strategy, by the way. If you're walking in the dark alone.
Yeah, fair, yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. I like where you said when you were 12 and you first heard this, and didn't think anyone could do that. I think that's sort of, I'm trying to think, I've heard that idea where it's like, no, there's no way I could do that. I think some people seem very confident in what they can't do. I think a great skill is in being open to the possibility that you don't know what you can't do. It's like amazing things happen in this world, And I think we tend to only think, no, amazing things happen in the world of the history books. And the history books is this different world where full of possibility and full of incredible people. But people forget the history books they're written about this actual world, and you can just choose to be incredible. And a lot of the history books are written about people who started in a much worse place than we did, and they were able to accomplish incredible things. And so I think it's great hearing how, kind of grappling with that imposter's dilemma that we all sort of have. It's like, other people do cool stuff, but there's no way I possibly could. And so when, you're 32 and you're thinking about basically, it's like, hey, that the idea I had as a kid, maybe I want to do that. How did you overcome kind of that imposter's dilemma that like, no, I could actually do that?
Well, I think it was a combination of things. One, I had gone and done some living at that point,
Yeah.
right? So, you know how Steve Jobs did that. What was it, a Berkeley keynote address? And he talks about looking back at his life and connecting the dots. And this dot, he didn't see at the time, but these dots were connecting to, in fact, what he did. He's the one, for the one class he ever took in college, gave the world all of our fonts on computers, right? Because he took a calligraphy class, okay? So now I can look back and see what was happening. I think it's subconsciously. I think that it was probably by design, but I went off at the age of, what was I, like 21 or something? And I wanted to go do that backpacking thing in Europe, as you do, but I had no money. And when I say I had no money, okay, like if I spent $3 a day, that was wow. So my budget was, if you can't eat it, you can't buy it, right? Sleeping in the train station, sleeping in the park. And it's like, if there was, I remember walking past the Colosseum in Rome, swear, Colosseum in Rome, and they had the sprinklers, keeping the grasses green. I'm like, oh, excellent. I'm getting a shower today. Right. And just living on nothing and what have you. And that was a sort of a training for me to get by with nothing and pushing the human spirit and accepting every single hurdle and living 1 to 2 steps outside your comfort zone every single day. Every day you're living outside your comfort zone, because we, I think, as humans, like that routine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It crystallizes. Yeah.
And you get up, you have your coffee, you do this, you do that. And there was no routine in that whole European trip with a day pack for 5 months. And it was very much by design. I'm not boo-hooing, believe me. Right. But at the time, I didn't have a clear sight that I was going to walk around the world. I couldn't have told you at the time that this was a training ground for when I go walk around the world. It was that idea back in my head that walk, oh, that'd be really cool. But, that's impossible. And it was almost like I was testing myself. There was no other reason to do that trip in Europe. Do you see what I mean? So I what was the question?
I'm wondering like how you overcame sort of that skepticism of what you could do, that imposter's dilemma, and sort of and actually take the first step towards this trip, so to make it into a real thing and not just a dream.
I think it was then. Yeah, I see where I landed there. It was the life experiences, and I had been sort of pushing myself, whether I realized it was for a training ground for this walk or not. That's what had happened. And by the time I was then 37 is when I left. So I was about 35, 34 when I made the decision. And I set a date. You guys, I set a date. I said, August 1st, 1999, I'm going to leave on my walk. Okay. So I had 3 years to put this together. And I remember I did sales and marketing at a hotel. And the boss was giving me a promotion. He said, I want to move you up to this position. And I said, okay, but I think it's only fair that I tell you that I will be leaving on August 1st, 1999. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go walk around the world. He's like, okay, no problem.
Okay, sure.
Sure you are, yeah. Definitely going to put that in the calendar.
And I'm going to go to space. Sure thing.
Yeah. So I think he's probably more alarmed than anyone. But
I love
really
that. I love that convergence of multiple things. Obviously the seed that was planted when you were 12 and kind of was allowed to nurture in the back of your subconscious is something that was, fantastic and interesting to you. And then the other key part, again, of not telling people about it and not letting their outsider naysaying of, oh, that's impossible. Oh, why would you do that? Here's, X, Y, and Z reason you wouldn't do that. So that idea was allowed to grow. Seeing someone else actually do it, but then they didn't do it. It seems like this thread that goes through this philosophical, journey in your mind before setting that date. And that's another thing too, is that proper preparation equals good luck, right? If you're going to actually plan for something, opportunity and preparation, that plus that equals good luck. And here you are today.
Yeah, I remember when I first said it out loud. Like I had decided that night, walking down that recreation trail, talking to myself, I decided I was going to do it, right? But this was right as we were getting on this thing called the internet and the www dot, this kind of thing. So there were very, very few websites, but, so there wasn't a lot of ways to do homework, the research. You had to go to Barnes and Noble, you had to buy every damn map.
Yeah.
I had the map spread across the living room. And you remember with maps, they had the red dots. It went dot to dot and then had a number in between. This was the mile, right? So I did that for the whole world.
For the world.
Night.
Wow.
One night. So in one night you went through and mapped out your whole trip?
Yeah. That was plan A. Plan A didn't pan out. But the first like barf of idea. Yeah. Yep. And I was going dot to dot to dot to dot. Writing everything down, had the map spread all over the floor. And then the world started changing very, very fast there in the late 90s when we started getting online and more websites, easier to do homework, like where can I go, where can I not go, and started kind of altering my whole change. But the first time I said it out loud to someone was really not planned. It was some random person that's not going to hold me to it.
There you go. That's the move.
Yeah, they're not gonna hold me to it, but I just said it out loud. And why do you walk all the time? I don't remember exactly the conversation, but I said, well, I'm really training. I want to go walk around the world. And he's like, oh, okay.
What's for dinner?
Right, and that was the extent of it. But that was the first time I'd said it out loud. And I remember thinking, walking out of that conversation, going, well, now I have to do it.
Now it's real. Now it's real.
Hold me to it or something.
So so after that first conversation, which was very anticlimactic, who pushed back the hardest? Like when you sort of expressed this idea to your friends and family, where they're like, sounds great, or they're like, you're an idiot.
I didn't get a lot of the you're an idiot. I really didn't. I think I'd sort of proven that I was an idiot.
That was already well established.
Yeah. Well, that I got. Okay. No, I had gone off and done the weird travel thing, like I said, with the, trying to sort of push the human spirit. And they sort of got that. But this was on a different scale. And I remember a friend of mine, again, not a great friend, but someone who knew me anyway. And, she's probably the second, third person I'd said it out loud to. She goes, so wait a minute. I remember she says, wait a minute. So you went and walked across England for 2 weeks, and now you think you can walk around the world?
Easy.
Right? And I'm like, girl, I walked around my house for 3 hours.
That was the real test, yeah.
Down.
A little bit of an exponential difficulty raise there, but it works. It tracks.
Great. Now just go do this like 1,000 times. No problem.
And not that walking around the world isn't hard enough, but as you mentioned in your book and you mentioned in some of your speaking tours, that 9/11 happened when you were in India. Is that correct?
Oh, wow. No, Malaysia.
Malaysia, excuse me.
Was my first Muslim country. And the thing is, I went westbound around the world. Now, there had been at the time, I don't know what's going on now, but at the time there had been 4 men that had walked around the world. And they all went east to west. Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't doing it to be a rebel. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what's the best way to go here so I can work out my kerfuffles and my, tweaks. So I thought, and I'd lived in New Zealand for 5 years. So I thought, why don't I start in Colorado and I'll go west? So I land in New Zealand pretty fast. right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can have friends and I can kind of, get some ground beneath my legs and get used to things. And coming up to Australia, still English speaking territory, still very Western, of course. And then by the time, that would be 2 years of walking right there.
Wow.
For me.
Just that, okay.
Ironically, I'm not that fast. So by the time I'll get into real foreign territory, I'll have some, experience behind me and have worked out all the tweaks. And that's exactly what happened. So I went down through New Zealand, up through the east coast of Australia, landed in Singapore, still very Western. And that only took me, a day to walk across. It's an island nation. And then once you walk over this huge causeway bridge from Singapore into Malaysia, boom, it just changes dramatically. The culture and the, scenery and religions and languages and everything. It's just like, boom, changes just like that. And I landed there on August 6th, 2001. The
Wow.
date is only important in that it was only, a month and a half before
9/11. And how did you hear about it? Obviously, you said it was pre-internet. Did you just the television everywhere, even that far east, it was still on every news channel, or how did you see or hear about it?
Yeah, I was halfway through the country. So I'm in Kuala Lumpur, which is their capital.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the Lions clubs, we hadn't talked about this, but the Lions clubs started picking me up in like very, very early Australia, meaning that a woman found me alongside the road and said, "What are you doing?" Because I'm pushing my buggy, looking lost. And I told her what I was doing.
Minnesota's that way.
Oh, she knows me so well. Yes, I'm wandering aimlessly. But anyway, she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "My name's Polly. I'm from Colorado and I'm walking around the world and it's for breast cancer." And well, let me introduce myself. My name is Margaret and I'm the president of the local Lions Club. You've got to get involved with the Lions Club. Why don't you come home with me? So I go to her place and she's, if you've been to Australia, every single town has a pub and the whole damn town goes to the pub and they party and that's what they do. That's where they meet. So we go to the pub, packed. Margaret stood up on a stool and she tells everybody, "This is Polly, this is what she's doing, and all the funds raised here stay here and help Australian women. So let's show her a little Aussie spirit, okay?" So she leans over, plucks the hat off a guy's head, and she passes this hat around. Now you can't get a photo of this, right? Mm-hmm. But I have this vivid memory etched in my head of this hat floating through the pool hall and people throwing money into it and past the dartboard competition and through the bar and through the restaurant. And the bartender announces to the cheering crowd, "We've just raised $332 for the Breast Cancer Network." Yay! And they pat me on the back, told me what a great job I just done. And I was like, "Thank you."
I did this all, yes.
Some nice pep in your step there. Okay.
So they passed me to the next Lions Club up the road and they took me out to the bar and they passed a hat around and they passed me to the next. So next thing you know, I'm doing this pub crawl up the east coast of Australia. And we'd raised like $35,000 on my trek up there. Yeah, for the Breast Cancer Network. And then that Lions organization in Australia contacted the ones through Singapore and Malaysia. And they did the same thing, only it was, you guys wouldn't even believe it. I was like stinking Forrest Gump out there. I mean, hundreds of people walking with me every day, all day.
Oh, wow.
Right? So to get back to the question, yes, I'm coming back to the question about how did you hear about 9/11? I had to explain how the Lions clubs got involved. Otherwise, I can't make that quantum leap. But anyway, so the Lions clubs are just piles of them walking with me every day. And they took such unbelievably good care of me. It was overwhelmed, right? So, which is funny because one Lions club always liked to outdo the Lions club before. Like, where did they put you up last night? I'm like, well, they put me up at this hotel and got me a massage. Oh, we put you up at this hotel and give you 2 massages. I'm like, well,
okay.
So anyway, they dropped me off at this hotel in Kuala Lumpur. And it was, I wanted to go get up to par in all the world events in case I need to know anything. And so throughout Southeast Asia, at least at the time. So this is now 2001. And so people couldn't afford to have computers at home. I don't know what's going on now, but that was at the time. So they had internet cafes everywhere.
Okay, yeah.
So I remember clearly the time because I find internet cafe at the base of the hotel and I log on, and there weren't that many websites still, right? But CNN had the main news website. So I log on to CNN.com and I see the time in the upper left-hand corner because it said 8:45 a.m. New York City, because that's the time they go by. New York City, 8:45 a.m. New York City. And I just noted because, it's exactly 12 hours difference. It was 8:45 p.m. my time, right? So I perused the news. It's like, okay, nothing of a life-changing nature has happened. I'll just go to bed. So
no.
I am sleeping for 8 hours over the course of the 9/11 happening and all the kerfuffleness and all the rest of it. And I don't have a TV. And so I get up the next morning ready to go. There's 100 people in the lobby ready to walk with me. And they're all looking very glum. Do you want to walk today? I was like, well, why wouldn't I? What's going on? And anyway, through broken languages and everything else, I realized, the newspaper guy came in. Yes, there were still newspapers, but he walks in with his pile of newspapers, and I saw what happened. And quickly called my dad in LA, go, what is going on? And so he told me. So they said, do you want to keep walking today? Or yeah, let's keep walking. I don't know what I'd do otherwise, but couldn't you find me CNN and internet access for tonight, to stay with someone tonight?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, you bet. So we're walking, and it was the oddest thing because you're walking down essentially dirt roads with kiosks with TVs hanging, and they're looping and looping. And remember the first days, we didn't know what happened, right? So they're just looping and looping and looping the same footage. And the whole gang of 100 people would just stop and watch. And then we'd keep walking and go to the next kiosk and look up at the TV and watch it and keep walking. And so that night they put me in touch with this couple. It was a Lions Club couple. And they were Muslim, a Muslim family, which I look back now, remember those first days, we didn't know anything. We thought we knew things. But out of the whole 5 years, which is like 1,800 plus days, the only night I stayed with the Muslim family was that night of 9/11.
Oh, wow.
Which is, when you look back at things going, wow, that was really weird. But it was a game-changing night in my life, game-changing conversation, because of the day that it was and who they were. And they were a very sort of liberal Muslim couple. And they said, they welcomed me into their home and they said, listen, we're really sorry, but we have plans tonight. So here, I know you want CNN. And they just plunked me down in the chair in front of CNN. And next to me was her mother, who was a Muslim woman with the headscarf and everything. We can't even communicate, but her and I sitting next to each other in a chair watching CNN.
What a picture. Wow.
On the night of 9/11. Isn't that crazy?
Wow. So did the warning bells in your mind, did the red flags, the fight or flight, did that tell you to go home to stop the trip, or was there any question? What did your mental state, what did that look like in the next days?
I knew that I had to be smart and not have a knee-jerk reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we didn't know what was going on. We now had some assumptions, more news is coming out, and how protected will I be? So I contacted the American Embassy, and I talked to the Lions Club members who I was very tight with now at the time. And I said, this is what's going on. And they were hovering over me before this. I mean, dude, I had police guards at my door right after 9/11.
Wow.
For like 2 weeks going up the west coast of Malaysia. And they say that they didn't hire them. They don't know who who asked the police to come or why. So that's a big mystery that I have. It's like, was there
to this
a
day, you
threat
don't know?
Or did the American embassy ask them to come, or
Wow.
so there's some mysteries, and that's one of them. It's like, all of a sudden the police were with us every day and all day following behind us. So there's some questions behind there that I don't know, but I ultimately decided that I would continue. And there weren't flights out anyway.
Where were you going to
True.
go?
Good point.
Right?
Fair point. I mean, that's interesting that places like Thailand and Malaysia, you mentioned prior, and of course just now, that they kind of defied maybe some of your expectations. The culture shock obviously is culture shock and experiencing it in different ways, but finding that Lions Club, finding those people to walk with you, that Forrest Gump moment is pretty cool. But I did see some of your other interviews that you mentioned that certain parts of Europe weren't as friendly as you thought they would be. Do you think that was just because of the backlash from 9/11, or was that just the general standing of how we were perceived in the world back then? Like, what were those experiences like in the more Western, usual tourist friendly places?
Yeah, I was blindsided in a few ways. And I think that's what I'd call my Europe experience, is blindsided. I expected one thing, and what happens when you have expectations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if it's anybody's fault, but I had this expectation, didn't get it. Right? So I will come back to that, but just to show you as an example of expectations, I had this vision in my head the years prior to leaving. You have a picture in your head as to what this is going to look like. And this picture in my head was that I would rarely see people. Where this comes from.
In the wilderness.
Solitary nomad.
Right. I had this picture in my head that I'm walking through Western China, and I would run into the occasional farmer and, beg him to talk to me. Right. So this is the picture in my head. So when the opposite happened, like in Malaysia, where now there's hundreds of people walking with me every day, all day, and they're lifting me and, literally lifting me to cross the street.
Wow.
And I wasn't prepared for that. So again, blindsided is a good way. And I had to just make this pivot in my head, change your expectations really darn fast, or else it's going to be tougher and tougher. So instead of, I trained for those years prior to be alone. Yeah. I'm expecting loneliness.
Okay.
How do I deal with this? And I read books on people that either by design or inadvertently were on these journeys where they had to deal with loneliness. And how am I going to just revving myself up for this, training myself. And then in Europe, I'd expected, when I crossed the border into Europe, it's, I'll finally understand a bit of the culture, and boy, I didn't. I don't know, a lot of things changed right when I got into Europe. So as an example of timing, they had just gone from their currencies into the euro. Okay. And what happens apparently, because I got there just months after, so they're still in a huge kerfuffle about it, right? All the prices went screaming high. Okay. So like a latte, I remember this was a big thing. Well, lattes are now $8 and they used to be 50 cents, and so all the food prices went up. And at the same time, I got no Lions Club support. So I'd had Lions Club support day to day, all the way through Australia, Southeast Asia, across India, Turkey, and then not in Europe at all. So again, that's one of the mysteries. Why did the Lions Clubs not? They weren't in touch. I mean, all these big Lions Clubs, I knew the international president himself tried to get a hold of them and, help be a part of this international sponsorship, got no response. So I was really on my own. And I'm not boo-hooing, and I hope the lesson is just, I hope it's taken appropriately, but just the sudden pivot when you have expectations and then that they don't pan out. So you have to readjust your thought process darn fast.
Best laid plans, yeah.
So what path did you take? So you went along. So you mentioned uh, Malaysia, and then through Thailand, I guess. Did you go through Myanmar or Burma at the time? Like what it was at the time?
I can love this. I still have the email, I swear to God. So I'm coming up now. 9/11 is, full bore. By the time, like the day before I crossed the border into Thailand, the war broke out in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. So that's America and all the allies going into Afghanistan, and riots broke out in Kuala Lumpur about this. And then I crossed the border into Thailand, and then it's a different story. And so a lot of places shut their borders down. And so I contacted the American embassy over in Myanmar, because that's where I wanted to go. I want to go up through, like halfway through Thailand, and over Myanmar, and then into Calcutta. And I explained what I was doing, and can I be in touch with them? And do you have any tips? And can we talk? And their response, I mean, a 6-page email that I write them, and they write back, "Don't even think about it." Don't even think about it. So 5 words.
A word per paragraph you sent. I like it.
Wow, that's so okay. So how did that actually work out? Like, so did you go around? Did you go through? Like, what's the plan?
So I went as far as I could up into Thailand, and then just caught a flight over to Calcutta. So
okay.
I couldn't go anywhere from there because I couldn't get into China yet, right? And China was just starting to open up to tourism. If I could take you back that far, they still weren't opening up, but they really wanted to get the Olympics into Beijing. So the Olympic Committee said, if you want to have the Olympics there, then you got to start opening up. You got to start, cleaning up this infrastructure. And that's when I was walking. So they hadn't quite cleaned it up and started letting people in at that point, because that was a big deal. You're too young over there, Monty. You're too young.
I got my gray hair here, so I know what you're talking about.
A shrug.
Right. I mean, you never met anyone that had ever been to China. That was a bit, wow, you've been to China. You must be somebody. But no one had been to China. And it started opening up, but it wasn't there yet by the time I got there. So I was stuck. So I had to fly over, landed in Calcutta, carried across straight down through the center of India, Calcutta to Mumbai. And then again, I hit a dead end. I'd been planning, I'd been talking to all of the Lions clubs in Pakistan, had my route planned, they're waiting for me, shut the border down. Because at this time, the day before I arrived into Calcutta, I remember sitting in my little hotel room there in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and the news breaks that the America, I don't know if it was an embassy, but close enough. The American embassy in Calcutta had just been bombed, and they're interviewing these people I've been in touch with all this time. I'm like, oh, what the hell? I'm coming in tomorrow. So the world was just really starting to inflame. We're now in Afghanistan, and the war in Iraq is starting to, be talked about, and so that's when I started coming. Well, then I arrive into India and start my way. I was going to go north and then into Pakistan. And that's when that Daniel Pearl drama happened, if you guys remember that. The Daniel Pearl Wall Street journalist who was kidnapped and beheaded in Pakistan.
Oh, that's right.
Near Karachi. So that's when I was on my way going,
just white woman walking through the desert. No big deal. Hi, how's it going? Know any good hotels?
What could happen here?
Nothing to see here.
They shut that border down too. So I changed routes, which now I facetiously say, doggone it, another war, turn left. But that's kind of what it was, the constant adjusting and
wow.
So
even
I think about those things now in business. When I have to make a pivot in business, I'm like, oh, big deal. I got my cats, I got a fridge, I got a place to go home every night.
That's a great pivot point to I wanted to explore how this journey with all of its, as you mentioned, kerfuffles and wrenches in the gears and different, plan A, B, C, D, and onward. How in your life post this journey, how does it change the way you perceive other, tasks that would have been quote unquote difficult in your life? How overcoming something like walking around the world affects the way you tackle other problems or projects or just, basic day-to-day stuff in your life? Do you still pull from the experience, or do you find that just the perspective in general has shifted?
Oh, I think both, because you know how we have that sort of mantra in America. Well, if you can put a man on the moon, you can, fill in the blank. So that's what I always go back to. Well, if I can walk across India, I can fill in the blank. So I have my own personal little mantra like that. But I do, and I tell you that the lessons that I learned are sort of almost contradictory sometimes. So as an example, I'm much more patient.
Mhm.
Much more patient, let's say, even growing my business. Okay. It's like, just stay at it, slow and steady, slow and steady. It will get there slow and steady. And then you look back in a year and go, wow, look what I did this year. Right.
Yeah.
But I'm less patient when it comes to people who say they'll do something and then they don't do it.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I kind of have a one strike and you're out rule. Right. Unless, I don't want to pretend I've had a friend for 20 years and they do something wrong.
They get 2 strikes.
Polly's harsh. She's fair, but she's harsh.
We won't go that far, but certainly I chose some not the best people, particularly at the beginning of my walk, to be involved with this and depend on and things like that. So I kept thinking, I'm sure they'll get there. I'm sure they're nice inside.
The distillation of that patience, of that understanding, of that perspective, like obviously you can't bottle it and sell it. You do speaking tours, you do public keynote speaking to kind of empower people and inspire people from your journey and those takeaways. There's a quote I really liked of yours that said, look back at any time in your life when you were really successful and follow the same policies for success now. That really spoke to me, and I love that mentality. And I wanted you to speak just a little bit more about that inspiration, about that kind of mentality and how you approach the world.
Yeah, I think I'm going to, again, bring it back to business. It's like slow and steady. And so, say I have a business now, and then it grows. And I finally had to tell all the people that, work with me, it's like, I should let you know where my head is and how I want to grow this business. I don't want to go just balls out, slow and steady, and we will get there. And it's controllable when we go slow and steady. I don't know if a business coach would suggest this, but I'm very comfortable in that. Let's say anything new or anything that we all go through, like losing weight, getting out of debt, anything like that. It will happen slow and steady. And I'll tell you what, I didn't realize this at the time because I hadn't been in business prior to leaving, but now being in business and you go to these classes and you talk about your action plans and your and your teams and your challenges. And one thing, I go to these seminars, I'm like, oh my God, that's what I did on my walk. And I didn't have this professional corporate name of what I was doing. But one of those things is I had my schedule and my route every day. I had a piece of paper from this day to this day. I'm going to go from here to here, this day here to here, this day here to here, for about 2 months. I always had about 2 months in advance planned, right? And I didn't want to go more than 2 months. It's like you have the blueprint of the house. If you're building a house, you have the whole blueprint, but you're not yet worried about the details, like, the doorknobs, what intricacy of the doorknob do we need? We'll worry about that later. Let's get the big picture first. So I knew I was going to go through Europe and I knew I was going to go through here, but as far as the details, I know I'm going point A to point B on this day. And because one reason is because I want to keep that vision very clear every single day. Do you understand? 2, 3 times a day, I would stare at this plan. I always had it. It was crystal clear what I was doing, where I was going in a timeline every single day. And I remember that. And that's one thing I take with me if I'm ever going to go slow and steady on something. Again, losing weight, getting out of debt, getting in shape, whatever the case may be. And I stare at that thing every day.
That foundational progress, right? That foundational progress is something you can control, something you can affect and move forward. Where if you do, you are building a house and you start concerning yourself with the, what the doorknobs look like, When you're still laying the concrete for the foundation, you'll probably go insane. You'll probably lose your mind. But if you're looking at, certain things one step at a time and the more largely foundational aspects, then yeah, that's a great way to do it. Looking at it 2 months in advance. And that's a really interesting parallel to our company, Expensify. We've been around for over 12 years now. Very, very slow and steady. Very, very one foot in front of the other, bucking a lot of the trends. David can speak to this more in depth than I can,
Right.
but there's a lot of people. I'm sure if you had a punch card, David, for all the people that called you crazy in Silicon Valley, you would have at least, a couple free trips around the world as well for that. But bucking trends and really sticking with the plan and moving forward. David, do you want to dive into that a bit?
I was thinking, actually, we have this concept internally. We talk about true north, and it's basically like if you imagine you're in a desert and you're just like, it's high noon and you're looking out to the horizon in every direction, and someone asks you, it's like, oh, which direction you want to go? Like, that can just be paralyzing. You can go anywhere. There's no way to decide. But if you just add one thing, say, oh, actually, there are some footsteps coming over the horizon to where you are right now. Now, where do you want to go? And it's like, oh, well, obviously, I should just keep going the direction I was going. There's probably a reason I was doing that. And so I think just adding a little bit of a tiny bit of context as to where you came from can suddenly make an impossible decision trivial. And I think that having this concept of like, this is the direction I'm going. I know why I'm going this direction. I know what's at the end of this road if I keep going that direction. It makes every decision super easy. And I think that, like you're saying, staring at your plan every single day, knowing why you are going this path, reminding yourself and really internalizing that, suddenly all of the tiny decisions just feel so simple. And otherwise, they could be paralyzing. So I think that, yes, having this idea of the direction of your life and just it gives you some sort of rubric to say, like, does this, like, I've got two choices here, A or B, and which one will take me closer to my long-term goals? It can simplify everything. So yeah, I'm totally a big fan of slow and steady, but with a clear eye to the horizon. So you said you got to Europe and everything changed. The train disappeared. And then finally you are, I guess, alone, as you imagined, but had forgotten. And so what was that like? Kind of this reverse culture shock of like getting into basically an uncaring Europe is like, I am unimpressed with your efforts.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was having a tough time somewhere, I instead of spewing, it's because they're this way and that way, I would always like reflect it back to me, like, why can't I accept this? What's going on in me that I'm having a tough time with? Do you know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
I was talking about the tough time when I was actually entering Europe again, the inflation because of the change over to the euro. That was a big thing. So now I don't have line support and the prices have skyrocketed, right? So I had those two issues going on. So, and it was getting used to, first of all, most of the world so far had been one road. So I can't get lost, all right? There's one road from Calcutta to Mumbai. You just get up in the morning, go turn left
go
or
onto
right.
the road, yes.
And there's one road. And in Europe, oh, good Lord,
all roads lead to Rome and then other places, I guess.
Which I only tell you to say it's easy to get lost. And two, my budget for maps, because again, it was before GPS, my map budget skyrocketed. You could not go forward without a map because you'd be walking in circles any minute. And so it was that added to the frustration as well.
Did you take many just like wrong turns? And you're like, well, I spent 2 days going this entirely wrong direction. And then
did that happen
not
much?
2 days so much, but it would be like miles, like 4 or 5 miles going, oh man. Because I do talk about it in my book because the signage is really bad. Okay. Now, granted, I have no sense of direction. I really don't. Swear to God.
That's a helpful thing when you're traveling the world on foot.
Yeah, it is a major handicap for someone walking around the world. But to add to that, the signage is just really bad. Like if there's a fork in the road, there's no sign at the fork, right? So the sign might be 200 yards up and there's an arrow this way. Well, that's not helping me. I need a sign right here.
Yeah.
So I decided, this is a great career. I should just create a whole career off helping the road signs. They got to hire someone like me who has no sense of direction.
There you go.
Right? Like, I'll show you how to get around airports and shopping malls.
Either that or go work for Garmin as a consultant or something, right?
Yeah. So what was the path that you took from Turkey throughout Western Europe?
Okay, so I landed at the south end of Turkey, and then I came across through the Greek islands, kind of hopped my way up there and landed over on what would be the west coast of Greece, and carried on up through there, and then took a boat across to Italy, about the center of Italy, and then came up through that coast, the east coast of Italy, and then right up through Austria, Germany, Luxembourg, France.
Wow.
And then across Belgium, and then up into the UK.
So you didn't have the large train behind you. So when you're walking through southern France, are you finally having that vision that you had of like just you surrounded by fields in all directions?
Yeah. Yes, and it's funny you say that because again, the being blindsided thing, and like I pictured this and the expectations, and so my expectations had to be, changed right away. And I thought, okay, well, this is what I envisioned in the first place. So let's let's just take this for what it's worth, and try to enjoy this wing of my journey. And what I discovered, I think, really surprised me in that. Remember, I said I have a schedule 2 months in advance. So if one of the Lions Clubs said, okay, you're going to be in our town in 6 weeks, where should we meet you? They always said that, where should we meet you? I'm like, I don't
guess it's as good as mine.
The road.
The road. So what I discovered, well, you guys probably know this, but there's a McDonald's in every damn town around the world, right? And they're always right on the
true
main
embassy,
road.
yes.
You're right. It's one end of the town or the other. I'm like, okay, do you have a McDonald's in town? They're like, yeah. All right. Easy to spot. Everyone knows where it is, right? So I was like, is it on the east end or the west end? It's on the east end. Great. I'll be there at 4:00 on April 2nd, right? Whatever the date is. And this was weeks in advance. And I am proud to announce I was never late. Because I knew how to pace myself, and it was always very funny.
Did you get a milkshake?
Yeah.
Did you get a milkshake for a reward? Did you eat Big Macs, or was it just a purely ambassadorial place?
Actually, there was a whole stretch in Australia where the McDonald's owners, the franchises, right? So the McDonald's owners would call the next McDonald's owner and say, hey, that's what she's doing. Go ahead and, feed her.
Get a McMuffin all lined up for her.
To the east coast of Australia, the McDonald's owners took really good care of me. That was funny.
Go ahead, David.
I think it's interesting. You're saying so you walked around the entire world on foot and was never late for an appointment. And I think that's
Expensify.
Gives everyone else. It's like, you have no excuse, guys. It reminds me of I was in South Africa, and I was thinking about your talking about how you just didn't have any money, and people invent all these kinds of reasons why they can't travel. And I was talking to this girl, and she had one leg. So basically, she was on crutches, and she only had one leg. She had no money, and she was like, I don't know, 19 or something like this, basically traveling around South Africa. And I'm like, man, if this girl can figure out how to do it, pretty much anyone. I feel like it's overcoming the sort of the desire to create excuses for yourself is a very tricky thing. And when you're on your own, on the road, or traveling around the world in these different cultures and different environments, I think it really strips away a lot of those potential excuses. And then when you look back, it's like, if people can do these sorts of things, we really can't justify not trying to do something. It seems like it's an active choice to not do something cool with your life, given all these proof points that you can do incredible things. You just have to step out of your house and start walking west.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. However, there's a however. There is something to be said for being 19, 20, 21, 22, doing that. Well, in my case, then into my 30s, even into my 40s. But now it's just really funny because, I was stretching my comfort zone every day. And, so I arrive home with a comfort zone this big. And now my comfort zone is,
Interesting.
That makes sense.
That's out of my 2-mile radius. I don't know about that.
We live in Portland. We rarely like going over the river in Portland. If it's on the other side of the
it's a
city,
big deal. Yeah,
it's a big deal. It's an extra
Really?
5 minutes in a bridge. I don't know about that. I love that though. I love that expansion of your comfort zone and allowing you to branch out into different things that I'm sure your life has taken a turn and you made decisions you never would have made unless you did this trip. I'm curious that when you were in that final stretch per se, when you were maybe more alone, getting back to where you came from, what personal epiphanies or revelations, like what was your mind, like what was your outlook on life? Did that change dramatically during the trip, before the trip, after the trip? I mean, obviously there were variables you couldn't have conceived, couldn't have thought of. But I'm curious what your mental state was towards the end of it.
It was one in which this chapter has finished, and I'm really ready to get on to the next chapter. Okay. So I know that a lot of people would do things like this. So let's say, for example, the last year to 2 years, people would email me very regularly and say that they had done something similar, like they biked across the country, to which I say, oh, that's cute.
Oh, you had a bicycle, mechanical machines. Like, yeah, try your feet. Yeah.
But anyway, I appreciate it. But then they would say, finishing and getting back into their life was the hardest thing. And I get that. But I think there were two big differences between what they did and then what I did. Okay, because why did they have such a tough time getting back into a real life and I didn't? I craved it. And the two things I think are, one, the timing. Okay, so they were gone maybe 6-8 months, these people that would email me, and mine was 5 years. And again, not boo-hooing, but it's a very big difference where the novelty is gone.
Yeah.
Okay, and when the novelty is gone, now it's a push. It's a push to the finish. Okay, there was never any doubt that I would finish, but it's a push. Come on, we got a year left. Come on, we got 6 months left.
Wow, we have a year left. That's
yeah, right.
Yeah,
no biggie.
Kidding. So was there any moment that you can think of that you're just like, I'm done. I'm just like this. What am I doing here? I just.
Right. Do you know? I swear to God. Right. Not one single time did I think.
Wow.
Not once, not one single time. There were a lot of times where I thought things like, I got to get the hell out of here as fast as possible.
I'm done with this road.
This particular place I'm done with. But
I really did see after a couple months more than a couple months, let's say a year on the road, I noticed this pace that was like, there was an ebb and flow, right? Good times, bad times, good times, bad times. And I started to notice this routine. And what it made me realize is that every time I'm in a miserable situation, I will come out of it again. It's not like this cloud is going to stick over my head and follow me through. A storm has never stayed overhead. So once I realized that pattern, it made me accept the tough times. And I knew they were a terrific learning experience, even if I was growling under my teeth and swearing up a storm. I thought, I almost remember like slapping your hands like, okay, here we go. What am I going to learn? Because I'm going to get out the other side. So I may as well accept the lessons while I'm standing here in my misery.
What a good metaphor for life.
Wow, no kidding.
Just life, business, relationships. Yeah. Man, I got to go home and think for a while. I got one last quick question. I got a couple more quick questions for you, Polly. First, I just got to know, what did you miss the most? Just from creature comforts or day in and day out. Was there any specific thing that you just craved?
Oh my God. Do you know, I swear to God, and just falling asleep to say Jay Leno on the TV.
Oh,
right?
Okay, yeah.
Right? And I never even really did that, but I just missed that. So here's what I swear to God. So I'm in Thailand, just maybe a month and a half or so after 9/11. Okay. And I'm in this cheap hotel that has a TV. I never even turned it on because it's like, I'm not going to understand anything anyway.
Yeah.
Middle of the night, almost, without thinking, I just turn the TV on. Jay Leno pops on. Right? This is like middle of the night, like 2 a.m. And this must have been the first show that they had after 9/11, because didn't all the shows shut down there right after 9/11, right? So I just remember Heather Locklear, she came on, she's all decked out in the red, white, and blue and the flags and and it was just, wow, like going home for an hour, right? That's what it was like to me. And just, wow, happy birthday to me.
Little stuff stuff that you recognize little creature
comforts. And the lange is like, oh,
a very comfortable chin.
What they're saying.
a very chin, comfortable chin of Jay Leno. Polly, again, the name of the show is Live Rich, Have Fun, Save the World. And again, our guests, we really feel encompass one or multiple of those themes. And we always like to talk to our guests and ask them, how do they see themselves having fun? How do they see themselves living rich? What does that mean? And how do you see yourself saving the world and moving forward? What do those three concepts mean to you?
I have always, I think, practiced the being able to laugh at yourself. If you're clear on who you are, I'm not a bad person. I may have made dumb mistakes here and there, but I'm not a bad person. So even when I was at my grumpiest and really nothing I'm proud of, losing a temper in the middle of Europe or something.
We've all been there.
Right? Let's be honest about it and frankly have a giggle over it and not take ourselves seriously and really understand that we don't understand where other people are coming from at all times. One of my pet peeves in life is when people just make up a story, and we probably started in, early on, like you're in high school. Oh, he didn't call me because he likes Betty Lou better, and he didn't like my haircut, and he didn't like my shirt. You're just making this stuff up, right? You're just making it up. So I now, even in business, they didn't like our proposal was too high or blah, blah. You're just making things up, right? So always ask or give the benefit of the doubt, always, because we just make stuff up all the time. And I hate making up the stories, don't we?
Yeah, I know. So, I do sometimes.
I guess that's that's a part of living rich is being able to laugh at yourself. There's this great, I don't know if it's a mantra or a rule in life. It's like tragedy plus time equals comedy. Like now I can look back and laugh at the whole India drama.
Yeah.
Because it was a drama every day. I remember walking down the road, looking at my watch, going, oh, it's still 4:00.
And you've obviously raised a lot of money for breast cancer awareness, over $250,000 in your global walk, and now you're speaking tours and you're raising that platform. I'm curious, when it comes to the Save the World aspect, that's obviously a huge contribution into that realm. And what are you doing currently with that? How are you currently expanding, even in the times of COVID, to get that message out there?
I made a promise to myself, to both the Lions clubs and Rotary clubs and the breast cancer movement, that, they helped me through this walk without any promise from me or anything, but it was just an internal promise of gratitude that for the rest of my life, whatever they ask for, whatever they want or need from me ever, they're going to get. So it's like, can you drive 4 hours and give a 30-minute presentation to our Rotary Club of 12 men over the age of 80? Yeah, I'll be there. Don't even ask the question. That's what I do. So I will. I do fundraising for my local breast cancer organization, and that looks like, say a book club asks me to come and they'll give a donation. I don't ask them for it, but just sometimes they do that. Sometimes they'll pass a hat around.
There you go.
Yeah. So I guess real grassroots things like that.
Love it. I love it. Polly, thank you so much for joining us on Live Rich, Have Fun, Save the World. The book is 3 miles per hour, the adventure of one woman's walk around the world. Definitely some inspiring stuff in a day and age. I think we could all use it. Thank you so much for joining us, Polly.
Thanks, guys. You a good time.
Take care. Bye-bye. Live Rich, Have Fun, Save the World is brought to you by Expensify. Hosted by David Barrett and Monty Bernard. Engineered and produced by Monty Bernard. Theme song by DJ Mick. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Live Rich, Have Fun, Save the World on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you happen to be listening.